how did it start for you? You met Stephen. It seems like it was a pretty whirlwind romance, kind of love at first sight. All sounds wonderful.
He was very much the knight in shining armour. He turned up at the right time, and it was all very romantic.
You were a single mum of 2 at that point.
I was,
and
yes.
No man in your life, yes.
And we had a lot in common. Stephen used to be in the English National Ballet. He was a professional dancer. I had performed when I was younger. So, you know, we had a lot of things in common on so many levels, and it just seemed so perfect.
And you got married in months?
Within months, yes.
Literally months of getting together. You met in the, was it the April?
We met in April. He actually worked for me. He was a ballet teacher at my theatre school, and he worked for me, and we became friends first. And then we had this whirlwind romance, and yes, by September we were married.
So you were all happy, it was all wonderful?
All wonderful. You can see we were.
Well, yeah, but then looking back now, obviously, fast forward years, and obviously what you've been through, the telltale signs you now sitting there looking back, things started around the wedding planning, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, to be fair, I think hindsight is a wonderful thing, and this is one of the things that I try to highlight now when I try to help raise awareness of domestic violence and domestic abuse. Obviously, violence is a huge part of domestic abuse, but actually there is far more that goes alongside that. Like coercive control, we know there's a new law that came out last December, which is a groundbreaking law. This is the first time that we've actually been able to do something that could potentially stop people being physically abused. You know, we can actually take action before the physical side happens. And so when I look back now, I see things that I didn't recognise as being abusive. But when I look back, or controlling, absolutely. Decisions that I thought were being made because someone was being caring actually were controlling.
So for the wedding example Rylan mentioned there, why do you look back on that and say that was quite controlling? What did you do?
I think at the time what I thought was very romantic, and the fact he wanted to go while I was working to go and book the wedding.
And the date and the venue.
Well, we discussed the venue, but he went and booked it. And so when he came back, he said, oh, it's in 3 weeks' time. It was all, oh, my goodness. And that moment where your heart beats and thought, oh, well, actually, that's romance. And it was all, you know, there'd been mentions of Gretna Green, and it just seemed like a bit of a fairy tale. Unfortunately, it didn't have a very happy ending.
And then you say, you know, and part of that fairy tale was that 3 days before the wedding, you discover you were pregnant. He's thrilled. But you said even then, things that might seem caring, like, where are you, what are you doing? Oh, I'm worried about you because you're pregnant. You can now look back and say, actually, that was quite controlling.
I think that one of the things that often happened was, I mean, my mum used to often call him the boomerang, because we would have, you know, what would seem like a normal argument or dispute about something very small, and he would pack a bag and leave, and then come back within hours and then leave. It was very stressful, but at the time I almost excused the behaviour, thinking, oh, he's taken on too much, it's me and my children, and now I'm pregnant.
Blame yourself in
I
a
did.
way.
I started to blame myself, and of course as soon as you do that you start to adapt your behaviour, and as soon as you start to adapt your behaviour to tiptoe around the other person, that's when the coercive control starts to take place.
Did he alienate you from family and friends?
I was very much isolated. I was already living at a distance from family and friends, but that distance became even more noticeable.
Well, there was an incident where this all began. You had just given birth to your twins, and in the hospital there was a small argument that happened, and he hit you and broke your jaw. It was actually him that walked out of the room calmly and called the police himself to report this. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, and I pressed charges against him because I absolutely knew it was not acceptable.
And he received a suspended sentence?
He received a suspended sentence. He was convicted of GBH, and he was put on a domestic abuse programme and probation for 2 years. But everybody, he had no criminal record before this. There was nothing to say that this person had ever been abusive before. And although it was not acceptable behaviour, hence I pressed charges, I also thought, well, you know, maybe I've been in early labour for 10 days. I've then given birth to premature twins at 29 weeks.
Yeah.
We've got a business that we're trying to run. We were in a different area because I'd given birth early. There was so much happening. I thought, oh my God, he's had a breakdown.
Yeah.
And because he walked out of the hospital, I made an excuse again.
And did you take him back after
I did. I went to court, and I was actually called up to speak with the judge. And the question the judge asked me at the time was, has he ever done this to you before? And I told the truth. No, he hadn't. Had the judge said to me, has he ever you know, suggested that you shouldn't speak to certain members of your family? Has he ever controlled what you may wear or where you go? Or had those questions been asked, actually, maybe there would have been a different outcome.
You might have looked at it in a different light.
So the violence was the culmination of all the control before that?
Yes, it was like a pressure cooker that built up, and the violence was the moment. The violence was the moment.
You say he did come back, and you tried again for a little while, but eventually you did separate, and you've got a new partner now. You're very happy for 3 years. There will be people watching, men and women, this morning, who might be worrying that possibly listening to you and the things you're saying, actually that's happening to me. What would you say to somebody who believes they might be in an abusive, a coercive, you know, relationship?
If you even slightly question, sometimes that gut instinct that tells you, question this. If you're not sure, make a phone call. There are so many support networks out there. You know, there's the National Domestic Violence Helpline, there's Women's Aid. Women's Aid also, by the way, if you are a male going on through an abusive relationship, you can also contact these people. They will still signpost you on.
Well, we'll put all the details
on
our
website
website too, yeah.
But just, you know, there will also be local help within your regions that... If you go online, there will be ways of finding out what the local help is. But just speak to somebody, because if you're not sure, it's better to ask the question and get the help early rather than wait and let it carry on and carry on.
And sometimes people find it hard to talk to excuse me, a family member or a friend, or often they've been alienated.
It's sometimes easier to talk to
Becky,
somebody.
it's really good to see you. And,
thank you, and thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
But
you're on
I
tour
do
as
say,
well.
you know, it does so much good, because even if there's just one person watching this today that goes and gets help, or even just gets some information, that is an amazing job you've done. So thank you to you and Women's Aid.